This morning's scripture lesson comes out of the letter to the Colossians, and I'm going to be starting in the 3rd chapter. This is the Message version. I don't know how familiar you are with that version, so it might sound a little less formal than the NRSV or the NIV or whatever you're reading these days. Listen now to these words. So chosen by God for this new life of love, dress in the wardrobe God picked out for you. Compassion, kindness, humility, quiet strength, discipline. Be even-tempered, content with second place, quick to forgive an offense. Forgive as quickly and completely as the Master forgave you. And regardless of what else you put on, wear love. It's your basic, all-purpose garment. Never be without it. Let the peace of Christ keep you in tune with each other, in step with each other. None of this going off and doing your own thing. And cultivate thankfulness. Let the word of Christ, the message, have the run of the house. Give it plenty of room in your lives. Instruct and direct one another using good common sense. And sing your hearts out to God. Let every detail in your lives, words, actions, whatever, be done in the name of the Master Jesus, thanking God the Father every step of the way. I love that version because I think that the writer of this letter was really trying to say exactly what that said without all the formality that was attached to it in some of the other versions I read. We have this way of living and being that we're called into, right? To get rid of the old stuff and to put on the new stuff, to put on love. When I was a very young girl, I lived around my very extended family. It was a very large family. We all lived within a few city blocks of one another. And almost every Sunday afternoon after dinner, and dinner was at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, my grandfather would take me out for ice cream. And some days, if the weather was nice, we would go to the park. Now, my grandfather always wore a suit on Sundays. He wore a usually dark-colored suit. Olive green was the color of choice in those days. And he would have on a white shirt and a tie and a fedora, no matter where we went and what we were doing. And I was always in a dress, usually with black patent leather shoes and white gloves. And that's how we would go to the ice cream parlor down the street. I was not allowed to wear pants when I was a little girl. That's another whole cultural story, which we can get to another time if you're really curious about that. But we would go down to the ice cream parlor, and I would carefully eat my ice cream, and then we would get to go to the park. When we went to the park, there was always a brown paper sack, and in that sack, there were clothes appropriate for the park. You couldn't wear your dress at the park. And so I would go into the restroom and change and come out and play, and then before we went back out onto the street, I would put that dress and those black patent leather shoes and gloves back on. My grandfather always had with him a wet rag wrapped in plastic so he could wipe my face and my hands and my legs off to make sure I was clean when people would see me on the street. Now, I have to tell you, we were quite the dapper couple, he and I. And of course, in my mind, my grandfather was larger than life and one of the kindest, most gentlest men that I would have known. There was no doubt as to who I belonged to when we were out together. And this is Brooklyn, so you have to imagine that there were a lot of people on the street, and we knew most of the people in our neighborhood. And so everybody knew everybody, and there'd be lots of conversations between our home and the park. My grandfather was pretty enamored with me. I was number one, and that came with a whole lot of privilege. I never worried about where I was or who else was on the street with us. And to be loved that way is such a gift. It really was life-giving and empowering for me. And truly, it was something that not only was handed to me, but that I got to open every time we were together. You know, in the letter to the Colossians, these people right in the very opening lines are told that they're loved like that. Actually, they're told they're loved even more than that they're loved with this radical and crazy, reckless love of God that just pours itself out into the people that call themselves followers of Jesus Christ. And that's the way each one of us are loved as well. We are loved radically. It's almost crazy the kind of love God has for us. It's life-giving and empowering, and it's a gift. It's a gift to each one of us. And because we're given that kind of love and grace, because the God who we serve is enamored with us, we need to have some kind of response to that love. It was never a burden for me to be all dressed up in my little dress and my white gloves to go out with my grandfather. I loved to do that. And my response to that was always a smile. There were conversations to be had and a hand to hold. It changed the person I was as I was growing up. It made the world a little sweeter and a little less frightening. The God that we serve loves us so much more than that and expects that we too will have a response, that it will make us a little kinder, a little gentler, a little more patient with one another, even meek. Because really, isn't that the people we're supposed to become as we love and serve this God who calls us into being? Our response to that should be something out of the ordinary, not typical of all the things that our culture says is typical, but the things that God says are typical of the people who follow Jesus Christ. We are supposed to put on love every single day. You know, the Trappist monk Thomas Merton says that we know those who belong to God by their lives. He says those who have claimed a new life in Jesus Christ come to reflect the love of God for themselves and others, setting aside things that would divide them and seeking unity and peace for all creation. I love that image, that the people who follow Christ are known because of the way they live their lives. This is not just some crazy group of people that goes off and lives in isolation in a commune together. These are people that live regular, everyday, ordinary lives. But yet people who see them know that there's something different about those people that call themselves Christian. And it really is something that's not as easy as it sounds. We can read the words of Colossians. We can read about how we're not supposed to be divisive and how we're supposed to live in unity with one another, how we're supposed to be filled with this sense of thanksgiving and joy. And I wonder if anybody's ever lived my life on some of those days when I get up and I think I am anything but joy-filled and thankful. And I know that I'm not alone in that. I know that there are days where it's really hard to get up and go, today I'm going to be patient with my coworkers. I know that it's difficult to say in the midst of some economic crisis that I'm going to be thankful for the things I have and not wanting the things that I don't have. I know that there are times where you look at somebody and you wonder where there's fairness. All that they have been given in their lives, whether it's economic or social advantage or educational advantage, and go, wow, God, I'm really thankful. I know those things are difficult. We all know those things are difficult. But those are the things that we're called to as followers of Christ. And the only way that we can ever figure out how to make that happen for ourselves is to put on this love that God has given us to put on, to wear it externally, and not just internally. Because to be seen and to be known means that you are actually living that life to be seen and to be known for whose you are. There's a very interesting thought I had as I was reading this, and I thought about how difficult we find it to be Christians today, how hard it is to put on love in the world that we live in. And I thought about those first century people in this church in Colossae, and I thought to myself, couldn't have been that hard for them, right? Until you think about Rome. You know, to worship anything but the emperor was treason. To wear that love externally, to be known for who you worshiped, who you were, and whose you were, meant that you were willing to risk your life to be called Christian, to claim your baptism. And I'm not sure how many of us understand what it means to risk your life for your faith. But that's what this church was called to do, to live in such a way that when people saw them, they knew who they worshiped, and it wasn't Caesar. And if you weren't going to worship Caesar, you could end up like Jesus. Frightening thought. And so I wonder if today we would be willing to go that far, to wear our love in such a way that people know not only who we are, but whose we are, and risk our very lives for that faith. That's what this church was facing. That's why this letter is so important. Because, see, there was a conflict. Do I choose the new clothing, or do I keep on the filthy rags that I've been wearing all these years? Do I wear the stinky sweatsuit that I've worked out in over and over again? Do I continue in anger? Do I continue in judgment? Do I continue in vengeance? Do I continue in hatred? Or do I shed those things? Do I take them off? And do I say, I am the new person that Christ has called me to be? And am I willing then to risk everything for the reign of God on earth as it is in heaven? There's a saying that the clothes make the man or the woman. And certainly for those of you who watched the Golden Globes and watched the internet for the week following the Golden Globes, you know that the clothes indeed make the man or woman, because nobody really cared about who won the awards. But everybody was worried about what those stars and starlets were wearing, right? Who had the best gown or the best suit, and who had the ugliest fashion faux pas of the night. Right? Everybody was so worried about what they had on. Would you ever consider that every day you are on the red carpet? Every day. Every time you leave your home, you walk on the red carpet. Like those stars and starlets, people are watching. They're wondering. They want to know what will come out of your mouth, what your behavior will be. Will you walk in integrity? Will you speak the truth? Will you be honest on your taxes? Will you wear love? Will you put on the garments of Christ? The beautiful, new, perfect garments of Christ. And I think that will be the challenge for us in the year to come. Because every day we will have a choice. We will choose each day whether we're going to the ice cream parlor with our grandfather, or we're going to the office, or we're going to school, what we will put on. We can continue to walk around in filthy rags and the old stinky clothes that we've worn for years and years and years. Or we can claim the beautiful garments that Christ has for us. His label is sewn in those. Your name is on there as well. And you can walk holding his hand, chatting about your day. You can walk the red carpet never alone. And always know that you belong in that place. Because at the end of the day, what you wear really does matter. Amen.